Welcome to my Atlantic Division predictions. This is so very late. I actually started recording this bit by bit before the regular season started. I didn't change the order of my predictions though, ever. And you know, life happens. Before we get started though, don't forget to give me a little love. And if you're new to the channel, you know, do the subscribe thing. Enough foreplay, let's begin. Number 8. The Montreal Canadiens. The Hockey News also has them predicted 8th in the division. They finished 28th overall, 26th on offense, 27th on defense, 27th on the power play, and 24th on the penalty kill. However, they were tied for 4th in the league with goals from defensemen. Speaking of which, Mike Matheson led them last season a nice time with just over 25 minutes. Slafkovsky looks like he's finally arrived. Laine was a nice gamble. But now he's injured. They need offense from someone who's not just the first line. I'm really interested in seeing a healthy Kirby Dach and how he rebounds. And Josh Anderson has got to put the black thing in the net more. The defense looks very promising. Hudson looks amazing. I'm really interested in seeing Caden Gooley in his second season. Matheson is a sneaky pickup if you're in fantasy hockey for their first power play unit. After David Savard, though, I just don't think there's enough defensive acumen to help keep the puck out of the net. For the goalies, Montable's fine. He looked better towards the last half of last season. And I'm looking forward to Primo taking a step as well. Management has done a wonderful job of rebuilding this team. So they're up-and-comers, but obviously I don't see them making the playoffs. Slotting in at number 7 in the Atlantic Division, I have the Detroit Red Wings. Maybe that's a bit of a surprise to some people. The Hockey News has them placed in 6th. Now, last season they finished 18th overall, 9th on offense, 24th on defense, 9th on the power play, surprisingly, and 14th on the penalty kill. And Moritz Seider led all players in ice time with over 22 minutes. But in terms of key departures and UFAs, they just lost too many goal-scoring personnel for me to think that they can just make that up with Tarasenko or the ascension of Raymond, for instance, alone. Even though their power play looks relatively untouched this season, after surprisingly finishing in 9th, I don't think the rest of the lineup is going to be able to hold up. And then there's their defense, right? Seider is amazing. He'll probably get even better. Edvinsson should take a step, but after that, they're a bunch of bottom pairing defensemen at best, really. And then when it comes to the goaltending with Talbot, Leon, and Husso, if it's not injuries, it's unpredictability and consistency with some of these guys, right? Like Talbot can be great, you know, for a few months and then not. Or, you know, Husso in terms of his injuries last year and Leon going down. I just don't have much confidence in that part of their game either. Could they finish in 6th? Yeah, it's definitely a possibility, but I don't think it'll be any higher than that. And for me, it's 7th place. In 6th place, I have the Buffalo Sabres. Now, the Hockey News has them in 5th in the Atlantic. They finished 22nd overall last season, 23rd in offense, 11th on defense, 29th on the power play, and 13th on the penalty kill. And Rasmus Dahlin led them in average ice time with just over 25 minutes. Now, one of the biggest problems last year was their offense. A lot of their big guys took a dip. About 70 goals just went poof out the window. A lot of guys had a down year. Thompson, Tuck, Dallin, just to name a few. And the power play was one of the biggest issues, going from 9th a couple seasons ago to 29th last season. And so they lost a couple of offensive players in Olofsson and Skinner for starters. And so they brought in Zucker, Ryan McLeod, and a bunch of depth guys to fill in the 4th line. I think they're banking on the new coach will help revitalize some of the offensive players as well. In Lindy, we trust. And who knows, Jack Quinn, if he could stay healthy, could step into his own this year as well. And the defense has probably the biggest potential of any other team in the Atlantic right now. The goaltending looks to be slowly stabilizing. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen took a step last season. I feel like there are a couple of middle 6 forwards and maybe a defensive defenseman away from a playoff ticket. Because even though I see them playing better than last year, I just don't feel there's enough there. Buffalo, Detroit, Ottawa, shuffle the cards, pull one out, and you'll see who finishes towards the bottom half of the Atlantic. I think the Sabres could finish as low as 7th and finish as high as 5th, but I still don't believe they're going to make the playoffs. Number 5, the Ottawa Senators. Now, the Hockey News picked them to finish 7th in the Atlantic, and last season they finished 26th in the league. 20th on offense, 28th on defense, 23rd on the power play, 29th on the penalty kill. And Jake Sanderson led them in ice time with over 23 minutes a game. Now, like Buffalo and Detroit, there's a lot of ifs and buts here, right? But I look at this lineup and it looks much more deep than those other two teams that I mentioned, especially at forward. I know Buffalo looks like they have somewhat of a better offense, or at least the better potential, but I think Ottawa's got a lot more balance back there on D. Back to the defense in just a second. Let's talk about the forward group. All the young guys, Tkachuk, Stützle, Greg, Pinto, Batherson, who are spread throughout 3 lines, all have to take a step, or at least most of them, especially in terms of consistency. Not to mention Norris, but can he stay off the IR? Because it definitely helped create a crater in that lineup as the season went on, especially as how they're awful coming out of the gate for years now. And then you have that fourth line, which looks pesky. Gregor, Gaudette, Cousins. You have some more veterans to help Giroux out with this club. Perron, Amadio, and Jensen. But speaking of Jensen, let's look at this defense. It's really important Sanderson continues to blossom this year. He definitely has the pedigree to do it. He's playing with Zub. Shabbat is playing with Jensen. Clevin is playing with Hamonic. There's just more balance there than last season. And yeah, I know the Chychrun trade wasn't the greatest, and Jensen is older, but you have a perfect mix of offensive defenseman, up and down those pairings. And it should be good enough. I love that Travis Green, the new coach, is a bit of a hard ass who brings structure and defensive responsibility, which is what this team was craving for so long. And I haven't even mentioned Allmark yet. Maybe he hasn't had the greatest playoff success, but he's been one of the most consistent goalies in the past few seasons, especially playing with Boston, I know, and their defense was, good. So if they could just be a little bit better than average on the back end, they should be okay. And now he signed a multi-contract as well, so there's more stability there. Not to mention another veteran in that locker room that they sorely need. I like the mix of young and old, and although I've got them in 5th, I think they've got a decent chance of stealing a wild card away from the Metro Division. In 4th, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now the Hockey News had them finishing in 3rd in the Atlantic. Last year they finished 13th overall, 5th on offense, 22nd on defense, 1st on the power play, 5th on the penalty kill, and Victor Hedman led them in ice time with just under 25 minutes. Let's start with the goaltending. Vasilevsky, after the surgery he had last season, came back. He was a little slow to regain his form, but in the last quarter / half-ish of the season, he became the goaltender we all knew. Of course, they got eliminated in the first round again, this time by Florida. I would expect more out of Vasilevsky this season. Jonas Johansson is backing him up again, though. In his 2nd year of that contract, he played 26 games, had an .890 save percentage. I feel like Vasilevsky could use a backup to take another 3-4 games per season, and if someone else tries to sneak a goalie through waivers, maybe Tampa jumps on it. The defense, this isn't as bad as I thought. Now, they made that trade with Utah. Sergachev went one way. Moser and Geekie came back, and they've got Hedman with Moser. Moser played top 4 minutes with Utah. That should be decent. McDonough and Cernak on that shutdown pairing, and it's what they were missing ever since McDonough left, really. Bottom pairing, Lilleberg and Perbix. Perbix had an off year last season. He really needs to rebound. Lilleberg, if I'm saying that correctly, should be a steady presence next to him, but I feel like it could go north or very south. Then there's the forwards, and this is where you find more flaws. Obviously, Stamkos left. Gensel came in. He's playing beside Point and Kucherov. I would imagine he'd get around 40 goals this season. But then after that, there's some drop-off. It feels like they've got a first line, 2 third lines, and a 4th line. Now, Cirelli, Hagel, and Paul, who are penciled in on the 2nd line, are talented enough to score some goals. I could see Hagel with around 25. I could see Paul with around 17. So it's not bad. The 3rd line is Geekie, the 20-year-old, centering Atkinson and Radish. Radish was a defenseman. Yes, I know. Well, he's on the wing this season, and Sherry seems to be a scratch for at least a couple games that I've seen Tampa play so far. I have no idea what to expect of that line. Obviously, Radish will be the defensive conscience. Let's see if Atkinson can regain his form, and who knows what we're going to get out of Geekie. But he made the team, so 4th line, Glendening, Chaffley, Gergensons. Don't know if I feel too good about that. At least Glendening is good at faceoffs. They're just missing a lot of depth there, which is why I have them in 4th. Now, I could see them be as high as 3rd. I doubt it, though. I could also easily see them slide into 5th. See one if Ottawa, Detroit, or Buffalo, especially the Senators, leapfrog them. But I still, even if that did happen, would see the Lightning getting into the playoffs through that extra wildcard spot through the Metro. In the third spot, I have the Cup champions, Florida Panthers. The Hockey News has them first in the Atlantic. Now, they finished 5th overall during the regular season, 11th on offense, 1st on defense, 8th on the power play, and 6th on the penalty kill. Their ice time leader last year was Brandon Montour, with just over 23 minutes. Now, let's start with the goalies. Bob, I think he needs a little bit more rest. He's 36 now. The problem is Stolarz is gone. He's in Toronto. And they've got Spencer Knight and Chris Driedger backing up. And I just don't have a lot of confidence in those two right now. I have no idea what to expect from them. Knight obviously has the pedigree. Driedger was good at one point, which is basically the last time he played for the Panthers. Now on defense, they lost 2 big pieces in Brandon Montour to Seattle, OEL to Toronto. They were really good at puck retrieving and moving the puck. And they were also their top 2 power play guys. We'll see if Forsling or Boqvist can fill in that hole there. Now in the first pairing, it's Ekblad and Forsling, which is great. Second is Mikolat and Kulikov. It's really where they start missing OEL and Montour. And then the third pairing's Schmidt and Balinskis. At least they're cheap, like Scotch tape and glue. I think before the deadline, they'll be looking for at least one depth defenseman. A puck mover, I'd imagine. Now, when it comes to the forwards, the core is still there. The top 6 is back. However, the bottom 6, the fourth line's entirely gone. But on the second line, at least you have Lundell and Luostarinen. Lundell especially played really good in the playoffs. Those two should be able to hold down that third line. And then the fourth, I don't know what to expect. But I would presume, again, before the deadline, they try and get at least a bottom 6 guy to fill in some holes. Maybe a center who can also play wing. Even though I have them in third, it wouldn't surprise me if they popped into second or even first in the Atlantic. Maybe they could slide down to fourth, but this is a playoff team, obviously, and still a big cup contender. In second place, the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Hockey News also has them in second. I'm a bit offended by that. Last season, they were 10th overall, 2nd in offense, 21st on defense, 7th on the power play, and 23rd on the penalty kill. Of course, we've got new coaches. Craig Berube heads the list. Mark Savard on the PP, Lambert on the PK. And at the time I'm shooting this, they're about 3 games into the season. Let's start with the goaltenders first. Wall is on the IR. Now, hopefully he's not there for much more than a week or so. We'll see how that turns out. But Stolarz has been amazing. And I've said this before, but I wish they had gotten him way back when he became a UFA from Anaheim. And then Hildeby plays in New Jersey and lets in maybe one bad goal, but he's pretty good too. So they got a 6'6", 6'7" guy in net, neither with a lot of NHL experience, but they have very high ceilings, and so far so good. I am not worried about the goaltending whatsoever, even though Wall has yet to play a game. Would I trust Stolarz and Hildeby as a tandem going into the playoffs? I think I would. Now on defense, the big shiny new toys, of course, are Tanev and OEL. Tanev looks good so far next to Riley. You barely notice all the great things he does on the ice from game to game. No surprise there. OEL has surprised me maybe a little bit. We all know he was good in Arizona, stank in Vancouver, played really well with Florida, especially when Montour and Ekblad were hurt. More and more, it looks like he's going to get a longer chance on the first power play unit instead of Riley. He's got a pretty decent shot and is great at finding the open lane. He retrieves the puck quickly, he's out of his own zone fast, and he's got a bit of nasty to him too. I really like that. It goes well with McCabe. Just 2 irritable D-men. Now, Benoit looks like a staple on the left side, even though he's been taking a lot of penalties in the first few games of the season, but he did last year as well. It's who's beside him on the right. Now, Timmins has been fine so far, better than expected for me anyways. I don't see that as a permanent thing. I know we're all waiting on Archambault, but who knows how many games this guy's going to play. Can he play games consecutively? Can he play in the playoffs? How many games can he play in the playoffs? So they're going to need another guy there. I do not believe they're sitting on the laurels. I think at least before the trade deadline, they'll be looking to fill that spot with someone else. I know there's Philip Myers, who's got a right shot as well, a much bigger guy, more of a defensive D than Timmins, for instance. So it's an option right now. I'm sure they'll drag that out to see how these two guys play. Liljegren looks like he's on the way out, even though he'll probably get some games coming up soon. His $3 million salary for a bottom pairing defenseman is just not worth it. They free up some cap space. We've also heard about Kampf moving out as well to move some more money so they can accrue some space for the deadline. And yeah, let's move on to the forwards now. The only shiny toy there is Steven Lorenz, who's been wonderful as well. What a perfect fourth line that is with Kampf and Reeves. They took out Reeves the other day, put McMahon in, and they looked even better. But you can see things changing and moving around because if they try and move Kampf's salary, maybe Dewar will come back from the IR. He'll play center. Maybe Holmberg will move down a spot and play center. Maybe McMahon will move up the lineup. Maybe Lorenz will move up the lineup. He hits. He's pretty fast for a guy his size. He goes to the front of the net and he's defensively responsible. I don't think it's out of the question he plays in the top 9 in a pinch. Look for them to try that out. And right now it's more about who's playing with who. I know, Brewery's got Matthews and Warner together with Nyes. I like to see Domi back on that line with Matthews and Nyes or whoever they decide to slot in the left. Max and Austin worked so well together for those 15 or 20 games, whatever it was. That allows you to spread the love a bit. Push Marner down to the second line with Tavares. Maybe put Nylander on the third. Robinson, I haven't even mentioned. He's made his way into the lineup. Good for him. He's producing. He's working hard. He's a dog on a bone. Again, there's still a question about how effective he can be in the playoffs because he hasn't been so far. When will Bobby McMahon move back up the lineup? Will Nye stay on the top line all year long? Do they need some more left wing depth before the trade deadline? That's a possibility. I gotta go with the popular vote though when it comes to 3C. I think it's their biggest need right now. I think it's too much for Holmberg at the moment. If he plays 4C, if Camp gets traded, that could be a perfect mix. And you slide in, I don't know, like a Yanni Gourde from Seattle or something into that spot. We'll see who becomes available at the deadline. The Leafs are definitely a playoff team. Could they finish in first? Yeah, I think it's a possibility, although I think it's slightly more likely they slide into a third spot, but in my opinion, that's the range. And first in my rankings for the Atlantic are obviously the Boston Bruins. Now, the Hockey News has them in 4th, which I found a little odd considering some of their ads. But we'll get into this. Now, they're 7th overall last season, 14th on offense, 5th on defense, 14th on the power play, 7th on the penalty kill, and Charles McAvoy led them in ice time with just under 25 minutes a game. Now, starting with the goaltenders, Allmark is gone, Korpiasalo is there to back up Swayman, but I think they'll be fine. Korpiasalo wasn't so great with Ottawa, but showed some flashes in LA, and he was hot and cold in Columbus through his career. I think he'll be fine in front of a much better defense, at least on the occasions he is called upon. Probably around 30-35 games this season. Swayman looks like the real deal. Yeah, I know he hasn't played, to the 50-goal mark-ish yet, but it looks like he's ready. And in case of fire, Korpisalo stinks. You break the glass. You grab Busso from the minors. He's been doing well there, and he may just be ready for the bigs. Now on defense, the big ad, of course, is Zadorov, who looks like he's playing with McAvoy, which is just a scary tandem, because in the past, I want to say last season, McAvoy led the team in hits. So having Zadorov next to him should benefit them both. Maybe McAvoy will crack 60 points for the first time in his career, having Multiverse Big Z on the back end to help him out. Who, by the way, the odd time steps up and blasts bazookas from the blue line. Then you've got Lindholm and Carlo, another great shutdown line. Their top 4 is probably one of the best in the league. Then you bottom pairing, you got a bit of a revolving door, but it looks like Laurie will stay on that left side. Witherspoon might come in here and there, with Peak on the right. I think if there's any deadline acquisitions for Boston, it would probably be a veteran for that bottom pairing right-hand side. On forward, Lindholm slots in very perfectly. The 3-zone centerman between Zacha or Marchand, and of course Pasternak. Look for him to put up around 70 points this season. If you play fantasy hockey and you picked him up late, you could be laughing. And he's a beast in the playoffs as well. Then the second line is coiled between Marchand or Zacha and Geeky. I could see any of those guys cracking 20 goals. And then the bottom 6 is full of youngins. I think Frederick is the eldest at 26, who might hit 20 goals himself this season. Poitras is the center of the future, with Brazo on his right, the latter of which should also take a step this year. Big man. I mean, the entire Boston squad is huge, really. And fourth line, Kosteluk, Kopke, Beecher. If there is a deadline deal to be made here, probably to upgrade their fourth line and maybe even get a right winger to push Morgan Geeky down the lineup. This team looks better than it did last year on paper, which is why I'm befuddled by where Hockey News has them in 4th. I put them in 4th last season after losing Bergeron and Krejci. This year, I have no delusions. I would love to hear where you rank these teams in the Atlantic Division down below in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. My apologies again for this coming out so late. Please give me some love. And if you're new, don't forget to hammer that subscribe button. If you're a veteran of this channel and you'd like to support me, you can do that through my crowdfunding site called Buy Me a Coffee. Thanks again, and remember to be excellent to each other.